G'day guys, I'm Ben, this is Living with BC, welcome back to the channel. Got a quick one for you today, I'll try and make it quick anyway. This is a review of the last book I've read, Legacy of Ash by Matthew Ward. I don't have a copy of the book that I can show you because I borrowed it from the library and I've already taken it back. But I'll put up a copy of the cover so you can see what it looks like. Look, got a pretty good score, or rating rather, on Goodreads. A lot of people seem to like it. It's got a pretty good fan base. So look, without further ado, we'll just get stuck into it and I'll tell you what I thought. G'day guys, Editing Ben here. I forgot to mention that there will be spoilers in this video. So if you haven't read the book and you want to, and you don't want me to spoil it for you, maybe stop watching now. Also, I shouldn't have to say this, but I'm going to just preface and say that everything that I say in this video is purely my opinion. You might read and have a different opinion, that's perfectly fine. We're allowed to disagree. But this is just my opinion of the book as I read it. So first up would be world building. The main nation we spend most of our time in is the Tressian Republic. Now, some people I've read have, that gives them ancient Rome vibes. I didn't really get that. I just sort of imagine that to be your stock standard European setting. The other nation that we hear about is the Hadari Empire, which there's not a lot of description, which is one of the low points of this book. But I was sort of imagining from a couple things that I mentioned, it was sort of Middle Eastern, maybe even Asian influence coming in there. There's not a lot of description, like I said. There's not really much emphasis on cultures or religious ceremonies. So we don't really get too much of a vibe of what the actual countries are like or what world we're living in. There is a map at the beginning of the book, which is a common feature in fantasy novels. But other than that, like, I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you, what the weather's like. I couldn't tell you, what sort of people inhabit it. It's really just a place and there's some people there. That's all I really know, because that's all the author gave me. One of the strengths of this book is that there's a lot of diverse characters, particularly in the Tressian Republic. Men and women are pretty much equal from all I can tell. Women can serve in the military, they can attain rank, they can serve in all levels of government, and they're respected just as much as men, which is good, because if we're going in that sort of historical time period, women weren't as respected, and that's where a lot of fantasy books follow that sort of patriarchal system. So this is much more of an equal system here. The Hadari Empire, we don't spend too much time in, but we know that's a little bit more of a traditional patriarchal system. There's one character there who's a female, and she's kind of fed up with, being told that she can't do X, Y, Z because she's a woman. And she's like, well, I can do just as much as a man can do, which is obviously true. And she proves that throughout the book, which is good. But the huge cast of characters, both men and women, all strong in their own right. The issue I have with the characters, and where it's going to get a few points marked down from me, is we don't know too much about them. There's so many. You're following a good 12 characters or so, and a good 6 or 7 of them are quite significant to the story. So because we spend so much, we don't spend so much time with characters, because there's so many characters to cover, you don't spend a lot of time with them. So we don't really know them all that much. We don't get to know their thoughts and feelings. There's a couple that we do delve into here and there, but it's not a lot. It's not enough to really get to know them. So I felt, rather than someone going along on the journey with all these people, which is one of the main things you read a book for, is you want to be kind of immersed in the story, and you want to sort of feel like you're in the fight with these people or on this quest with these people or whatever it might be. But I just felt like I was just a spectator, just standing back and watching what was going on. That was a little bit frustrating. Also with the lack of descriptions, as big as this book is, there's not a lot of descriptions in things, either in the way things look or the way they smell or how people are dressed or anything. Like, there's very little description at all. So there's one character who's constantly referred to as a giant, but other than that, I just, I couldn't tell you much about the characters. Because we don't spend too much time with each character, we don't really understand like their motivations and their desires. And so, knowing who the good people are, it's just kind of your stock standard. They're noble, they're honorable, they're self-sacrificing. And the bad people are, always like, they're manipulative and they're ambitious, and they'll, cut the legs out from under people to get where they need to go. I personally would have rathered if the cast of characters or the list of characters was a lot smaller, and if we were only following sort of 5 or 6 in total and then 2 or 3 main characters, but we got to know them a lot more than what we did in this book, so that I can understand their motivations, their desires, and then be there for them when they either succeed or fail. That's what you want in a book. If you've seen my video welcoming you to the channel, you'll know that I did a reading update of this book where I talk about the plot being really plotting. It does pick up the pace quite a bit in the second half, but not nearly as much as it needs to. There's a failed rebellion and the seeds of dissent are slowly bearing fruit, but the key word there is slowly. The prologue starts off with this failed rebellion that I just mentioned, and then it jumps 15 years later, and then the main story evolves around tensions between the North and the South following this failed rebellion, potential invasion from a Hadari empire, which is their their closest neighbor. And then towards the end of the book, there's a thought to be vanquished dark power that comes back and kind of kills everyone. I'm not sure if the author was trying to expose things in a tantalizing way or if it's a byproduct of having too many characters to follow. But by the time you get back to one character's point of view, you've made very little progress in their story. So each time you're reading about a specific character's point of view, you're only reading about a tiny little bit at a time. And it's frustrating. It makes the whole story seem really drawn out. The writing itself is really good. The author is obviously very talented at putting words together. But I found a really strange choice that the author makes is that whenever you're coming up to a really exciting, action-packed scene, just as you get to that bit, the author decides to switch perspectives. So instead of following that character through whatever exciting, enticing moment they're about to go through, you get right up to that crux point and then switch perspectives to someone who's far off, and we watch it from a distance. And that's a really strange situation to me. It's like, I want to be with that main character who's getting in the thick of it. I don't know if they're trying to be mysterious and keep suspense, but when it happens all the time, it just ends up being really drawn out, really slow paced, and I stopped caring about any exciting thing because I know it's going to be snatched away from me at the last second. The magic system in this book follows a pretty typical light versus dark, good versus bad sort of thing that we see in most fantasy series. It's all over the place. One thing that is interesting in this book is that they create like these giant suits of armor or these lions out of metal, and then put the light magic, which they control, into it, and then they can control these suits of armor to go fight people, or these lions to go hunt people down, or whatever it is. The only way they're able to be destroyed is if you kind of rip open the metal and the magic escapes, and then they're quite obviously rendered useless. But it's not really explained why they have to put the magic in the metal in the first place. Like, why can't they just control it? Like, it's kind of a common theme here that there's not a lot of detail and description in anything that happens. Like, why do they need to do that? Why do they need to do this? It's just things that are happening. And they're interesting enough, but when there's so many things happening and none of them are explained and you're just expected to go along for the ride, it gets a bit frustrating. It's likewise one of the main characters, Victor, has this dark power he refers to as his shadow. We don't really know what it is. It's just a part of him. It's been a part of him, I think, since he's been a kid, and he just calls on it once in a while. That's all it refers to. Is it'll just say he called on his shadow and it helped him do X, Y, Z. Generally, fighting in some sort of battle, and it gives him strength or whatever. But that's kind of all we know about it. And at the end of an almost 800-page book, I feel like I should be able to explain in depth exactly what it is and where it came from and how it works. But I don't know. So, I'm sorry, I can't tell you that. This one's a bit of a hard one to rate for me because it wasn't a bad book. It was interesting enough to read, and the writing is pretty good. Like I said, the author can string words together with talent. But there's so much that happens, and it's not laid out in any richness or depth or significant detail. There's no descriptions of people or places or significant descriptions of things that are happening. So I feel like I'm just a visitor passing by rather than part of the team. So for me, I wish there was a lot more description a lot fewer characters, a lot fewer subplots, but just more embellished in every other way. So I'd probably only give it a good, look, I'm going to say 3 out of 5. I know that's still a pretty good score, but like I said, it wasn't a bad book. It was just a bit frustrating in some situations. Alright guys, that's all I got for you today. If you've read the book, put a comment in the comment section. Let me know what you thought. If you've liked this video and you want to see more, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll keep making these sort of videos for you. Until then, have a good one. Stay cool.